Hey guys, happy summer solstice. It's the 22nd of December today. It's a beautiful day here in Coffs. A little bit of sunshine, a little bit of clouds. The waves were moving this morning, which was good. I basically just want to do a short video for my standards and basically talk a little bit about why I challenge this so-called government when it comes to licenses, driving, registration, all these kinds of things that are brought in and enforced upon the people through legalese and legal terms. So I just wanted to do a quick video because a lot of people are already going to be aware of these precedents and what I'm going to talk about. But some people are not. So I just want to get it into the minds of other people why I challenge these alleged offences regarding driving. And hey Georgina, nice to hear from you. So yeah, it's been a while since I've been online. Just been sort of doing some self-work and moving through some of my own stuff. It's been some challenging couple of months, but yeah, working on my health and feeling really good. But so I wanted to just share this, and I want to talk about freedom of movement and why it's so important. The most important thing about freedom of movement and freedom of action, and why that is so important, and why it's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Human Rights Declaration in Victoria. Why do we have freedom of movement? If you think about what movement is, it's an expression of a natural organism, so a human being a natural organism. Now, if you think of the earth as a cell, as opposed to being separate, and you're part of that cell, if we are basically tied down and unable to move because of let's say a license or some sort of restriction imposed on us by a corporation, what that does in fact on a bigger scale is that ties down, it holds back or thwarts the natural evolution and creation or creativeness of the human being. So if someone is restricted of their movement and action because of a corporate policy, that corporate policy is in fact completely and utterly restricting the evolution of human beings. And it may not seem that way to some people, but that is exactly what's happening. If someone is unable to move and exercise their right to freedom of movement, then they are being suppressed and tied down and held down by a corporate system, which is literally suppressing the evolution of mankind. And that's why I want to talk about this today. So, that's what freedom of movement actually
there is a light
to it enables us to evolve, to create, to move, to go, to experience new things. And that's how the universe and the earth actually evolves, is by experiencing. But that's enough about that. I want to go to Black's Law Dictionary just before I get into the precedents. The precedents are what other Supreme Court and High Court judges have in the past ruled when it comes to licenses and rights to travel. But I just want to get clear in people's minds. Basically, what this is from the Black's Law Dictionary 4th edition. I just want to get clear in people's minds, the differences in the terminology and the words, because this is where people are getting trapped when they are speaking with corporate police officers. The words they use are extremely important in getting people to contract and agree to those contracts verbally. So the first one I want to talk about is natural liberty. Natural liberty is the power of acting as one thinks fit without any restraint or control unless by the law of nature. The right which nature gives to all mankind of disposing of their persons and property after the manner they judge most consistent with their happiness, on condition of their acting within the limits of the law of nature, and so as not to interfere with an equal exercise of the same rights by another man or woman, and is defined as the protection or unrestrained action in as high a degree as the same claim of protection of each individual admits of. So that's natural liberty. Personal liberty, and this is where we start talking about travelling and driving, or so-called driving, or let's say travelling. Personal liberty, the right or power of locomotion, which is, travelling in an automobile. Of changing situation or moving one's person to whatsoever place one's own inclination may direct, without imprisonment or restraint. That includes taxes, licenses, anything. No restraint, unless by due course of law. A due course of law is in a court of law, of proper jurisdiction. So that's natural liberty and personal liberty. And now I just want to talk about some precedents. So this is for the people who just assume that licenses are, a part of life, and that, when we're born we're supposed to get a license in order to travel and exercise our right to freedom of movement. This is Shuttleworth versus Birmingham, and I got a lot of these from the Know Your Rights website. I highly recommend anyone gets on that website if they're interested in this stuff. But this one, Shuttleworth versus Birmingham. Traffic infractions are not a crime. People versus Battle. Persons faced with an unconstitutional licensing law which purports to require a license as a prerequisite to exercise of right. So what they're saying is that you don't need a license in order to exercise your existing human rights to freedom of movement, to travel, to freedom of action. A license is not required. So, traffic infractions are not a crime. Persons faced with an unconstitutional licensing law which purports to require a license as a prerequisite to exercise of right may ignore the law and engage with impunity in exercise of such a right. That means if you don't have a license, you still have the right to freedom of movement, to personal liberty, the right to travel. You don't need a license. That is saying that any person can ignore that law and continue on with that freedom of movement. The problem we have now is that these alleged police officers that are uneducated in this sort of stuff, that are just following these illegitimate acts that aren't even valid, because they don't follow or they don't align with what is required for a valid act. They're just pieces of paper being written by a corporate government. Anyway, the word operator shall not include any person who solely transports his own property and who transports no persons or property for hire or compensation. So that takes us into when we start moving into commerce. If we are driving, and I'm going to talk about the definition of a driver and a traveller after, but when we are driving, that in itself, that word means that we are conducting commerce on the roads. Now when we are conducting commerce with issuance of a license to conduct commerce, that's when we become subject to those rules. But if we're not conducting commerce, if we're not being paid to move, then we don't need that license, we don't need that registration. And I'll continue on. Highways are for use of the travelling public, and all have the right to use them in a reasonable manner. The use thereof is an inalienable right of every citizen. That means it can't be taken away. That is an inalienable right. It can't be removed at all, regardless of whatever fake acts they bring in, it doesn't matter. Next, City of Chicago versus Collins. Now, some of these precedences are from the US, and the reason that is, and some people say you can't use US precedents, well, you can use foreign precedences, actually, and the fact is we don't really have any precedents in Australia where people have challenged these corporate police officers, or when they're acting in that corporate capacity. No one's challenged that yet in Australia, so we don't have those precedences, or not that I'm aware of. And if we do, could someone please send me a link? Also, furthermore, the Commonwealth of Australia, which is in all capital letters, and capital letters are just a sign, it's a sign writing, it's different from lowercase letters. So Commonwealth of Australia in capital letters is a completely different entity to Commonwealth of Australia in lowercase letters. Now the Commonwealth of Australia in uppercase letters, which is this corporation sole that is in power at the moment, is a corporation, and it is registered and owned in Washington DC in the United States. It's not an Australian company. It's got shareholders, and that's who owns it. They're the ones making these rules and enforcing them upon the Australian public. And that's why I'm using these US precedences. Alright, City of Chicago versus Collins. Those who have the right to do something cannot be licensed for what they already have. Right to do such license would be meaningless. So what they're saying is you've already got the right to travel, you've already got freedom of movement, according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all the other treaties and laws, relevant laws. They're saying that you can't be given a license and a right to do something, or a privilege, they would call it, when you've already got that right. Everyone's already got that right. Wingfield versus Fielder. The court makes it clear that a licence relates to qualifications to engage in profession or commerce, business, trade or calling. Thus, when merely travelling without compensation or profit, outside of business enterprise or adventure with the corporate state, no licence is required of the natural individual travelling for personal business, pleasure and transportation. The right to travel freely from state to state is a right broadly assert able against private interference as well as a government action. And the private interference is that Commonwealth of Australia in all capital letters. That is a private company that are interfering with your human rights by trying to enforce that you must have a licence to travel on public roads. And they're wrong. Like the right of association, it is a virtually unconditioned personal right, guaranteed by the Constitution to us all. Iron curtains have no place in a free world. Undoubtedly, the right of locomotion, the right to remove from one place to another according to inclination, is an attribute to personal liberty, and the right ordinarily of free transit from or through the territory of any state is a right secured by the Constitution. The validity of restriction on the freedom of movement of particular individuals, both substantively and procedurally, is precisely the sort of matter that is the peculiar domain of the courts. So a lot of people would say that me taking this driving offence to the courts is, I'm banging my head against the wall, I don't know what I'm talking about, or, that's not what the courts are there for. Well, these judges are saying that's exactly what the courts are there for. When your constitutional rights are being infringed upon and encroached upon and taken away by a corporation, the courts are there to protect you, to protect me, to protect us and our constitutional rights. This is why our Constitution is so important. A person detained for an investigatory stop can be questioned but is not obliged to answer. Answers may not be compelled, and refusal to answer furnishes no basis for an arrest. Well, that's not what they said to me. Automobiles have the right to use the highways of the state on an equal footing with other vehicles such as bicycles, horses or carriages, etc. Each citizen has the absolute right to choose for himself the mode of conveyance he wishes to use each and every day. Next one, Coco versus Queen. No, I skipped that one. I'll go to this one. This is a High Court of Australia case in Teo, T-E-O-H, 1995, 183 CLR 273. Chief Justice Mason and Dean stated, where a statute or subordinate legislation is ambiguous, the court should favour the construction which accords with Australia's obligations under a treaty or international conventions to which Australia is a party of, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we are a signatory to, such as the Victorian Human Rights Declaration, whatever it's called. At least in those cases in which the legislation is enacted after or in contemplation of. All these legislations are enacted after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is back in '66, I believe. Entry into or ratification of the relevant international instrument. That is because Parliament, prima facie or on face value, intends to give effect to Australia's obligations under international law. International law, common law, constitution, all comes above all of these acts that they're writing and enforcing unlawfully. De facto, this de facto government. It's not de jure. All right, next one. Justice Stephen Kay, Melbourne Supreme Court ruling, 25th of November 2011. It is an ancient principle of the common law that a person not under arrest has no obligation to stop for police or to answer their questions, and there is no statute that removes that right. The conferring of such a power on a police officer would be a substantial detraction from the fundamental freedoms which have been granted to the citizen by the common law for centuries. Well, this is a Supreme Court justice, a High Court justice. You know, these aren't just police officers who are following an act. These are High Court and Supreme Court justices who know what they're talking about. They've studied the law for their entire life. And these ones are actually standing up for the everyday Australians' constitutional rights and human rights, which most people in this country are completely unaware of, oblivious to any of those rights. And that's why this is happening. That's why people, laugh at me when I challenge these things, because they don't understand. They have zero understanding of the law or any precedences because they've never read it. And that's just the facts. You can't be aware of what you haven't read or you don't know. You just don't know it. All right, Regina versus Banner, the full bench of the Northern Territory Supreme Court. Police officers have no power whatever to arrest or detain a citizen for the purpose of questioning him or of facilitating their investigation. It matters not at all whether the questioning or the investigation is for the purpose of enabling them to ascertain whether he is a person guilty of a crime known to have been committed, or if it is for the purpose of enabling them to discover whether a crime has or has not been committed. So police officers can't just arrest people to determine whether they've committed a crime or not. They've got no jurisdiction to do that. The crime must, and this is very relevant in today's day and age in the fact that so many men, I've got friends who have been charged, that I know personally, who have been charged when they're, and I don't mean to sound divisional, but when their missus or their wives or their partners have been aggressive towards them, this new legislation where police must arrest the man upon any complaint. Well, the complaint is not sufficient evidence. There must be a trial before the police can arrest that man. And this man was attacked by his missus. And then she called the police on him. he was arrested, you know, and then he's got his child taken away from him and he's having trouble. And the problem is the solicitors are encouraging the women to do this because it gives them an immediate, basically, right to the child because they're getting a restraining order or, domestic violence order or whatever. And that immediately severs the connection between the man and the child, you know. So the solicitors are actually advising women to do this, and this is causing big problems in the family realm, in the community realm, because it is dividing everyone. It is bringing the state directly into your relationship. And women, if you feel it is not empowering to bring the state into your relationship, because as soon as you bring a third party, especially the state, into your relationship, you've basically destroyed that relationship. It's gone. There's no more independence, you know, between you and the partner and the child. That sacred bond is broken. It is divided. It's gone. So that one there is pretty important for police to understand that, because the legislation they're bringing in is a dictatorial legislation, and it just gives police power to arrest men, just for an accusation. You can't be arrested for an accusation. You can't have your personal liberty taken away from you, or your natural liberty taken away from you because of an allegation. That's what the court system is there for, to determine whether a crime has been committed, and then maybe the person does time or is punished, if found guilty in a proper court of law. But that is a big issue we've got at the moment. But I'll get back to the driving. Senior Magistrate Duncan Reynolds in Melbourne, July 2013. Justice Kevin Bell, Supreme Court, December 2014. Coercive questioning by police in an effort to request name and address of a person who is stopped constitutes a breach of the common law and Charter of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights to freedom of movement and privacy. And this is exactly what they did to me when they pulled me over for no registration. They continued to question me. I told them I didn't want to give them any information, but they threatened to arrest me. So under duress, I gave them that information. But they were coercively questioning me, which is an offence. They can't do that. You know, when they continue to ask you, that is coercive questioning. They're standing there with guns and whatever else, or there's three of them standing there and they're threatening to lock you in a cage. That's coercive questioning. It's manipulation. It's intimidation. That's what it is, but it's an offence. They can't do it. They're not allowed to do it. But their act doesn't say that, so they don't know that. They just simply don't know, because they don't read these precedences. All right, Bratwick versus Johnson. Stark J said that the people of Australia are thus free to pass to and from among the states without burden, hindrance or restriction. A burden could be a financial burden, such as registration or a licence. You know? And as we saw before, if you're not conducting commerce, you don't need it, because you're a private citizen acting in your private capacity. And it talks about that in our Constitution, where the police have no right. Just give me 1 second, I've got to close that door. Okay, Miller versus US 5th Circuit. This one's important. The claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. I love that one. So when you're driving in an unregistered vehicle, or you're travelling in an unregistered vehicle because you don't need to register it because you're not conducting commerce at that point in time, you're exercising your constitutional right under, I can't remember what section it is of our Constitution. Might be section 92. The freedom of intercourse, which is to move among the states, is absolutely free. So exercising that constitutional right can't be converted into a crime. You can't be charged for it and then penalised with a monetary burden that is going to create a victim in yourself. That is creating a victim where no victim exists at all. The police are in fact creating the victim or the injured party by way of taking money from that party when they haven't committed any offence. They haven't harmed anyone. Except the police pull them over and give them this infringement notice, and now they are the ones being harmed, the person who's been pulled over. You know what I mean? And that's why the harm principle states, unless someone has harmed someone else, the state has no legitimate reason for intervention. Okay, Miranda versus Arizona, 384 US 436. Where rights are secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. That's it. The Constitution is supreme, and we need to understand that Constitution is what is supposed to keep the government in check and stop them from enforcing these policies. They're not laws, they're policies that they are enforcing on us at gunpoint in this country at this time. Byers versus United States, 273 US 28. It is the duty of the courts to be watchful for the constitutional rights of the citizen and against any unlawful encroachment thereon. It is the duty of the courts to protect and uphold the constitutional rights of the citizens. And if they're not doing that, they are not a real court, and they're not a court at all. They're a company acting as a court, which is a crime in itself under the 1914 Crimes Act, personating Commonwealth officers. Just by the way, carries an up to 2-year imprisonment. Norton versus Shelby County. An unconstitutional act is not law. It imposes no duty. It is, in legal contemplation, as inoperative as though it had never been passed. This one, Hale versus Henkel, this one talks a little bit about what I'm talking about, commerce and private individuals. Hale versus Henkel, 201 US 43. There is a clear distinction between an individual and a corporation. The individual may stand upon his constitutional rights as a citizen. He is entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. He owes nothing to the public so long as he does not trespass upon their rights. Upon the other hand, the corporation is a creature of the state. Its powers are limited by law. So the individual is the private person who is travelling. And if they've got another person in the car with a guest, they are travelling with a guest. The corporation is a driver who is driving with a licence, who, if they have a passenger in the car, that passenger is paying them, such as a taxi. But if you just have a guest in your car and you're not conducting commerce, you are just a traveller. You are not a driver. So the driver is the corporation. That license, that driver's license is the corporate entity. That's why your name on that driver's license is in all uppercase capital letters, because they are signs, symbols, not lowercase. I think that's right. I should check my license. Let me have a look. Yeah, that's it. That's why your driver's license is in all uppercase, because that is the symbols of, I think it's Roman symbols. It is not English language at all. That's why the driver's license is completely that is you acting in your commercial capacity. That is the contract. But if you are not conducting commerce at that point in time, then you're not conducting commerce, you're just a traveller. And the human being, I think it's Article 11 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, has the right to change nationality. And nationality means state, which means your state of being. You know, so you're not always, just because you get a driver's license to contract or to conduct commerce, does not mean that when you are travelling in your private capacity, you are that corporation. No, you can be both. You can be either. And you're only that corporation when you are conducting commerce and getting paid for it. Or you are moving passengers, and those passengers are paying you, and we're going to talk about the definition of that in a minute. United States versus Jackson. If a law has no other purpose than to chill the assertion of constitutional rights by penalising those who choose to exercise them, then it is patently unconstitutional. And any state law that is in conflict with the federal law, which is the Constitution, to the extent of the inconsistency is invalid. And I believe that's section 109 of our Constitution. Because the federal law always comes above the state law. And that's why it's written in the Constitution. Any state law that is inconsistent with the federal law is invalid. They wrote that in there to protect individuals from the state and encroachment thereof. This isn't something new. This has been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. You know, and it's been a battle here to and fro. From control of the population to free population. Okay, Cohen's versus Virginia. A law cannot exceed the authority of the lawgiver. And just remember that the people are the lawgivers. And that comes under political liberty. Liberty of the citizen to participate in the operations of government, and particularly in the making and administration of laws. That's Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, under liberty. Okay, so a law cannot exceed the authority of the lawgiver, being us, right, in accordance with the Constitution. We are the people. We are the people of the Commonwealth. We have no more right to decline the exercise of jurisdiction which is given than to usurp that which is not given. The one or the other would be treason to the Constitution. The several state legislatures and judiciaries are all bound by solemn obligation of an oath to support the federal Constitution. Willfully legislating in violation of that Constitution is guilty of perjury. That is what this corporation, this Commonwealth of Australia in all capital letters, this corporation soul, is doing with these alleged acts. They're committing perjury and treason against the Constitution, against the people. The Constitution is there for the people. Make no mistake about that. So these are some of the things that I've put in my my defence for these alleged driving charges. You know, oh, here's another thing out of the Black's Law Dictionary. In propria causa nemo judex. No one can be the judge in his own cause. So what does that mean? It means the judge can't work for the Crown if the prosecutor works for the Crown also. If you've got two people working for the Crown against little old me, what hope have I got of winning? That is, you know, the odds are stacked against us. Also put in my letter, it is not my wish to be held or tried under any quasi-contract, nor is any obligatio quasi-ex contractu implied, nor is consent given thereof. It means that I don't agree to their contracts, their implied contracts, and the contracts that they are trying to impose upon me and get me to agree to. So I'm using a bit of Latin in there from the Law Dictionary. But this is a 15-page, basically, letter, which I may share after the hearing, which is in May now. So I've got a bit more work to do on this. But I just wanted to share that information because I want people to understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking about the infringement upon our personal liberty and our freedoms. When it comes to these illegitimate acts that they are enforcing upon us, individuals at gunpoint. And when I say at gunpoint, I mean they literally are carrying guns and they threaten to throw us in a cage if we try to exercise our common law rights. And our common law rights, are our basically protect our freedoms. So next I want to talk about is what's the difference between a driver and a traveller. So a traveller, according to Black's Law Dictionary 4th, is simply one who passes from place to place, whether for pleasure, instruction, business or health. That's it. A driver, one employed in conducting or operating a coach, carriage, wagon or other vehicle with horses, mules or other animals, or a bicycle, tricycle or motor car, though not a street railroad car. A person actually doing driving, whether employed by owner to drive or driving his own vehicle. So the second word, or the first two words, one employed, which means he's conducting commerce. You see the difference? And when the police pull you over and they say you were driving, and you go, yeah, I was driving, because you don't know that you were actually travelling if you're not getting paid for what you were doing. And you say, yes, I was driving on this street this time, then you have just verbally agreed to that contract and to be that commercial that you are driving as an employee or employed in commerce. Yet if you are travelling or you're a traveller, you are just one who passes from place to place, whether for pleasure, instruction, business or health. And that's it. And as we read before, I think it was under personal liberty, if you're conducting personal business, then you've got that right as well to freedom of locomotion. And the next one I want to talk about is passenger, just real quickly. So when they say you're driving a passenger vehicle, that's why when you register your vehicle, it is called a passenger vehicle. Because a passenger is a person whom a common carrier has contracted to carry from one place to another and has, in the course of the performance of that contract, received under his care either upon the means of conveyance or at the point of departure of that means of conveyance. One carried for hire or reward, as distinguished from a guest who is one carried gratuitously. That is, without any financial return except such slight benefit as in customary as part of the ordinary courtesy of the road. So just in that definition of passenger from Black's Law Dictionary 4th edition, you can see the difference, and this is how they are trapping people in that corporate legislation, they call it, in those corporate policies. Because as soon as you say you're driving a passenger vehicle, if you read any charges that they've given you, they're going to say the driver, Lucas, the driver, was driving a passenger vehicle this time and place. And immediately, if you're not rebutting that when they're saying it to you and you're not recording that, immediately, if you agree to that, then you have contracted with them. And that's how they get you. But luckily for me, I recorded everything, and when I go into court, I will be making sure that that recording is viewed in its entirety, because the police were coercively questioning me, which is against the law. I stated that I was just travelling, I stated all these things. So that's kind of it. I just wanted to share that quickly so that people can get a better understanding of why I challenge these rules, so-called rules, from this corporate, government. And some people think I'm against government, I'm against taxes, especially my brother, he comments a lot of stuff. I'm against this, I'm against the evolution of Australia, and that's not true at all. All I'm against is the unlawful encroachment against the individual's rights. And once all our rights are restored and our constitution is back in force, people are going to start seeing a big difference, and they're going to have more money. And when there's less taxes, Because you've got to understand the taxes that are going to this corporation, they're going to shareholders in other countries. They're not going to the Australian people. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about taxes, you know, and unlawful taxation office, that's what I'm talking about. I'm happy to pay taxes if it is for the evolution and to grow our country, but it's not what I'm saying. You know, so anyway, that's sort of it. Hey Megan, thank you very much. Hope you're doing well. Hey Julie. They cannot tax the freedom. That's right. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're trying to tax rainwater. You know, they're taxing air, the carbon tax. They're taxing everything. And if people can't see that, you know, they really need to think about these taxes, and they need to think about where that's going, because it literally is going to that corporate Commonwealth of Australia, not the Australian one. And by us supporting that, if it's not under duress, which it actually is, you know, we're all doing it under duress because we wouldn't be paying it if we weren't forced to at gunpoint, you know. But by doing that, we're actually aiding and abetting the enemy. You know, a foreign government in exile. We are literally aiding and abetting, which under Section 5 of the 1914 Crimes Act is a crime. You know, but we don't know it, or we're forced to do it. So anyway, that's kind of it. Hey Darlene, yeah, I haven't been on for a while. I've just been, you know, doing my own work on myself, getting my health back in order, and just sort of sorting out my personal life. But yeah, I'm sort of back. I'm feeling good. It's the summer solstice, so it's the longest day of the year today, or the most light. But yeah. Christine Wallen, yes, there are women who purposely use IVOs for own gain. Yeah, I mean, and it really is like that law that they've brought in, where if there's a complaint made against a man, he must be brought in, if that's even been brought in. That's what I was told. I haven't actually researched that myself, so I can't say that's a fact, but that's what I've heard is happening. And that is a breach of our common law rights. That is a breach of our human rights, because you cannot arrest someone if no crime has been committed. You can't arrest someone just because someone's made an allegation. You know, there must be a trial. If you're going to take away the rights of an individual, there must be a trial beforehand. Otherwise, you know, what if that crime hasn't been committed and you're arresting that person and depriving them of their liberty? You know, they've just exceeded their jurisdiction and taken away the human rights of the individual, you know, when it's probably not even true. And half the time it's not. Maybe more than half the time. Maybe that's why the statistics are the way they are, because the legislation is the way it is, you know. And my friend that I was talking about earlier, he recorded it. He had it all on recording. He had it all on video. And he went to show the police. And they refused to look at it. They said, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do. So the police are now not even looking at evidence, which is crime, custody rights, investigation, management, and evidence. They must investigate, you know, these 5 things. That is what a crime is. That's the definition. Custody, rights, investigation, management, and evidence. You know, so if they're refusing to look at the evidence because of the legislation or alleged legislation, they're committing a crime. They're not doing their job. They're not doing what they are paid by the people to do. And that's a fact. That's how it is. You know, but anyway, I just wanted to do that one. I wanted to keep it short, but it's really a challenge for me to keep those videos short. Please share this, because it is important that people understand their rights, and they get it from judges and people who have actually studied the law immensely for basically their lifetime's work, you know, because it's not me saying it, it's the research I'm doing and the work that other people are doing that I'm sharing. And I'm just standing up for my rights at law that I know exist, because I've done the research and I've done the work, and people have helped me. And I'm just trying to share the information with Australia and the world, if they want to watch it, because, you know, it is a spiritual battle. It's a battle for the human being's mind. If you control the mass mind of the mass population, then you control that population, you control the system. But if you can get this information out to people and people start to come aware and learn about their rights, then things will start to change. But yeah, Richard, where are the whiskers? I'm not sure what you're talking about, Richard, but it's good to hear from you, buddy. Hey, Stephen. Richard James, everyone's money is going overseas. Yeah, I mean, and they're selling everything off, you know, or they've already sold everything off, so everything's going overseas. I don't know why people continue to support this corporation that continues to rob them. I can't understand it. You know, some people think that because I talk about this stuff that I don't want a government or I don't agree with government. That is false, that is wrong. You know, with 25
There is a light to walk.
With 25 million people, we need to have some sort of structure that supports the people who are less fortunate and that can't support themselves, especially like the homeless, which aren't even being supported. You know, it's the private, non-profit organisations that are supporting the homeless. So I don't understand that. What do we pay the government for? That's what they're there for. But anyway, that's about it. I'm going to cut it off there. I've got somewhere to go this afternoon for the solstice. So thanks for watching and please share. And I'll see you all again soon. Have a great solstice and a Merry Christmas if I don't see you beforehand.